a very good evening. You're watching London Live Debate, the show that takes a deeper look at the stories making headlines in the capital. Yesterday, hundreds of people gathered in Westminster calling for more to be done to protect cyclists. The protest, dubbed a national funeral for the unknown cyclist, was backed by dozens of campaign groups and organisations. It involved the so-called die-in outside Parliament. The demo took place days after the official opening of more quiet ways, dedicated routes aimed at improving safety. But are initiatives like these the answer in our congested capital? What more is needed to save lives? And can London match other cities around the world that truly champion pedal power? Well, here to share their views, three bike advocates and campaigners. We have Donncha McCarthy from Stop Killing Cyclists, the organisation which was behind yesterday's protest. Tiffany F. Lamb is an urbanist and has researched cycling safety here and in New York. And Christopher Martin is an urban designer and planner and a member of the Urban Design Group. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming in on a very miserable, wet Sunday evening. We really appreciate it. Donncha, yesterday's protest, what demands were made?
Yeah, well, two clear demands. One was we wanted the government to invest £3 billion a year in a national protected cycle network. And our second demand was that the government reverse the toxic fuel duty cuts that they've imposed over the last 6 to 8 years. Something like £80 billion given to the motor industry, which has resulted in a massive rise in the invisible killer of cyclists, which is pollution.
In terms of the funding aspect, is that the real issue? Is that, do you think, the key factor that's required to improve safety? Do we need more money?
It's definitely our top demand. Nationally, the UK government invests around 1/3 of 1% of the Department of Transport budget. It equates to around £1.50 per person across the UK. Holland is investing £30 per person for the last 50 years, and that has resulted in a dramatic increase in safe cycling in Holland.
OK. Christopher, where do you stand then on the finance aspect of this? As someone who looks into planning, do we need to spend more money?
Personally, I think we spend a lot of money on our streets, but I think it's about how we approach that task, and I think we should be looking at designing our streets and spaces in cities to yield the greatest return. And I think looking at space-efficient transport modes, and something like cycling is a prime example, but also walking is where we should start to reassign some of these funds, as well as attracting new funds. But it's more of how we balance the big pot, I think.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, perhaps TfL's funding for cycling not where it should be. Donncha, would you say?
Current investment is around 3% of the total budget. We're calling for 10%. So, for example, they're currently spending around £110 million a year. But that sounds a lot of money. But when you compare it to 7,000 million for one river crossing or 30,000 million for the new Crossrail, it's buttons compared to the wider budget. So what we would like it to see is to increase to 500 million per year.
TfL would say they're probably spending more than they've ever spent before, though.
Well, if you spend 2 breadcrumbs instead of 1 breadcrumb, you're spending more. So what we would say is the London Mayor is one of the best in the UK. He is spending around 3% of the budget, but compared to the Dutch budget, it's still buttons.
OK, Tiffany, I know that you've looked at other cities, certainly New York as one. How do they compare to London when it perhaps comes to what they invest into cycling?
Well, I think in both cities, it's very clear that political will and protected cycle lanes are necessary to not only protect cyclists, but to increase cycling.
OK, so political will being an interesting phrase there. Do we have political will, do you think?
I think it could be a lot stronger. I think the rhetoric is there, but the follow-up and the implementation is lagging.
OK. Donncha, you mentioned that you think the Mayor is doing a fair enough job.
No, I said he's doing better than Holland, but I didn't say he was doing the job he needs to be doing.
OK. Is he doing better than other administrations?
He's doing better than others. But there is a key problem in London. The Mayor's committed to a network of cycle superhighways. The previous Mayor built 2 very good ones, Boris Johnson. However, the programme has almost come to a shuddering halt, not because the Mayor isn't giving the money or the commitment. It's that there are 35 local authorities in London can veto every single metre of the proposed cycle superhighway. So that's a massive political, institutional problem we've got in London. What's the solution? Is we ask the government to give the Mayor power to override the vetoes of these 32 local authorities. You're never going to get 32 boroughs in London agreeing on this network. We have to get government intervention, give the Mayor the power to get the job done.
Christopher, would you agree? Does the Mayor need more power from national government to make sure we get these schemes through?
I think it would only be a good thing. I think another thing is how we approach these projects. And I think a lot of the time, especially in sort of more technical things in traffic modelling and things, we approach these projects as though what we have at the moment is right, and the projects have to score against what's right, against what's happening now. So if you're impacting traffic negatively by too much, it can stop a project. When actually we might need to sort of rethink how we're looking at these projects and actually think what we have now maybe isn't right. So why are we comparing the proposals to the existing? And
so this comes down to this idea of ownership, doesn't it? Who owns the roads? And at the moment, would you argue that the roads are owned by vehicles?
So, I mean, it varies greatly across the city, but at the moment, very few cities are sort of designed expressly for people, I think, and I think that's the key thing. How we design streets can really yield a great deal of benefit to the people. So I think we should be designing as a sort of streets as a catalyst for that sort of increased prosperity, increased health.
Tiffany, I can kind of see you nodding along to this. Have we completely messed it up? Decades and decades of planning for the wrong types of transport that we now need?
Yes, I agree with Chris on that one, and I think now more than ever with this strong government push for autonomous vehicles that it's essential that walking and cycling advocates are allowed and heard at the table.
How do we kind of unweave what we've created? How do we kind of say, well, actually, we've had this system with cars. Now what we need is walking and cycling more, perhaps, potentially in terms of environmental issues. How do we go back from what we've got?
I think we start by pedestrianizing more parts of the city. We build more protected cycle lanes that are joined up into a cohesive network and not just piecemeal bits here and there. And I think there has to be more integration of land use planning and transport planning so that we can build communities where it's feasible for someone to walk or cycle, and that becomes the obvious easiest choice and not driving.
Okay, Donncha, we'll come back to the issues of congestion and some of the arguments to perhaps cycle superhighways, but I want to just bring in first the Mayor's Walking and Cycling Commissioner, Will Norman. Now, we asked him whether or not he thought it was right to promote cycling when safety can't be guaranteed, but also whether plans for those cycle superhighways have come to a halt, as Donncha suggests, because of concerns from local authorities, the other bodies involved. Here's what he had to say.
Cycling is very safe in London. We're seeing the numbers of people being killed on our streets, either as pedestrians or cyclists or as motorcyclists, falling over the years. And what we're doing is to enable more people to cycle, we need to make them feel safe, which is exactly why we're investing record amounts of money into providing that safe infrastructure, the quiet ways, the cycle superhighways, as well as addressing some of the dangerous junctions. So we have a program of new investment that is going on. We launched the strategic cycling analysis last year, which set out where we see the priority routes are. That set out 25 priority routes, and at the moment we're working on the designs and talking to people about those routes, and I'm looking forward to launching them soon.
Mr. Norman there, speaking as the Cycling and Walking Commissioner, he believes that the cycle superhighways that are in the pipeline will come to fruition. Would you disagree?
Well, we've seen Westminster has vetoed Cycle Superhighway 11. We've seen Royal Borough of Kennington and Chelsea veto Cycle Superhighway 9. Southwark is delaying Cycle Superhighway 4. Hounslow is delaying another Cycle Superhighway. There is a real problem. So I think Will and myself are on the same side. We want them to be built. And we are saying there's an institutional barrier to doing it, so the government must act. However, you raised the point of congestion. Can I make a point about that?
Yes, I was going to come to that next, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think that is where we have a significant criticism of the Mayor. People look at London, central London. One of the amazing things that happened in London, London set a world precedent with the congestion charge. The congestion of private cars came down radically, something like 30 to 40%. People don't drive into London hardly anymore for work. Only 3% of Londoners drive regularly into central London. So you ask yourself, what's the congestion on our streets? Our research was staggering. We found out 60% of cars in central London are cabs. 2/3 black cabs, 1/3 black mini cabs. The Mayor of New York is introducing a congestion charge for all cab users. Because what we've shown congestion charge works for private cars. What we are saying now is we need congestion charge for cab users to reduce the way the London, central London is clogged up with cabs.
That organisation and those bodies that represent the private and the licensed hire firms would argue that that was unfair on them. Why should they be punished for the fact that we need more space for cyclists?
No, they're not being unfairly punished. At the moment, the Londoners are being unfairly punished by a tiny group of travellers. Everybody else has to pay congestion charge if they're bringing a car into London. Why should a rich executive in the City of London hiring a cab not pay congestion charge like the plumber who has to service a house in central London? So we're saying it's fair to make sure that actually the congestion charge applies to everybody who uses a car in central London. So it must apply to the 60% of congestion of cars that is cabs.
Would other organisations support that argument? Do you think they should be made to pay?
Well, for me, the job of planning is to find the path which benefits the most people and benefits society as a whole, whilst also benefiting the city that the planning system is working in. So I think, it's an impossible task, planning, because our streets and our cities have to be everything to everyone all the time. And as with all impossible tasks, some people will win more than others, but the job of planning is to make sure that the majority win and sort of vulnerable users are protected all the time. So we just have to find that path and design cities that sort of maximise all the benefits.
I agree very much with that. And what our point is that 40% of the road space in central London is now occupied by cabs. 40%. But the amount of journeys that are taken by cab in London is 1.7%. We can't afford that allocation of space for a tiny group of people in our city.
OK, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we'll look at what is being done to try and certainly provide safer routes for cyclists in London. We'll also look at what other cities that are doing exceptionally well are doing as well and what we can learn from them. Stay with us, plenty more to come on tonight's debate looking at cycle safety in the capital.
Unstoppable isn't just killing germs. It's also helping prevent limescale where they can breed. I am Domestos, and I am unstoppable.
Trevor. Yeah? You're a private landlord, right? And your tenants are in a tough financial situation. They can't pay their rent, which is keeping you up at night.
Yeah, but
you're with Direct Line. They'll repay any unpaid rent until the tenants are out. So relax, Trevor. It's time for me to put you to sleep. Coco?
Landlords, Direct Line guarantees to beat the quote and renewal premium of other insurers for the same cover.
To get stuff you want at a better price, check Wildship first. Click that deal. Click that deal. You got it.
Hello Fresh. Dinner is solved. Make dinner time delicious and save 30% on your first 3 boxes.
Hey, Kate, I love your house. It must have taken so much work.
Actually, it was easy.
So hang on, all of this is from Wayfair?
Yep, and on a tight budget too.
Huh. Kate, but what if I want to be fancy?
They even do high-end looks too.
So kitchenware?
Yep.
Lighting?
Yep.
Storage that fits my hallway?
Yes, Lorraine.
Oh, I like Wayfair.
From budget-friendly to high-end, you'll find what's right for your home at wayfair.co.uk today.
Girlfriend, things that make you go wow. Things that make you go wow. Things that make you go wow, wow, wow. Yeah.
Please, can you send someone out? The poor thing is so skinny, I don't think he can walk. Oh, the poor thing. This is awful.
Okay, let me take an address.
Today, the RSPCA will answer around 3,000 calls about animal cruelty and neglect.
It's just completely unacceptable, isn't it, mate?
Today, we will need to take over 230 animals into our care. Today, we urgently need your help to save them. Please text TODAY to 70002. Every minute of every day, animals are suffering heartbreaking cruelty and neglect. Every day, our team works tirelessly to save them. A gift of just £3 a month will help us do even more. Answer more calls, rescue more innocent animals, and provide more life-saving treatments. But today, animals are suffering terrible abuse and neglect. Help us save them.
He's just been left tied up, I think. Poor thing's got no hair on him.
He's in a terrible state.
Please text TODAY to 70002 and give £3 a month. That's TODAY to 70002. Thank you.
Girlfriend, things that make you go wow. Things that make you go wow. Things that make you go wow, wow, wow. Yeah.
Mum isn't so mobile these days.
Your NHS repeat prescription can be delivered free to your home. Register now with pharmacy2u.co.uk/NHS.
It makes sense.
Whether you've overindulged a little or you just want to change your ways. London Live is lifting the lid on the capital's health.
Guys, I genuinely did not know it was that bad.
To see what damage has been done.
This is how lots of people do really drink.
And what we can do to stop it. Health season starts with Trust Me, I'm a Doctor. Monday at 9 on London Live.
London Live Debate. Tonight we are asking what more can be done to improve cycling safety in the capital following a mass demonstration in Westminster yesterday. Here to share their thoughts, Donica McCarthy from Stop Killing Cyclists. We have the urbanist and cycling campaigner Tiffany F. Lamb and the planner and urban designer Christopher Martin. More from the panel in a moment. First though, this week 15 kilometres of new cycle quiet ways were officially opened in London. The routes aim to provide a less busy alternative for cyclists and pedestrians. Let's hear more on those from the transport charity Sustrans.
We have an increasing body of evidence to show if you build high-quality routes, both quiet ways and superhighways, people will cycle. But there's still great concern in many local authorities about the backlash and the way people regard streets and appear to have ownership of the streets. So really, we need political will and increased and continued funding. So quiet ways are a really important part of the mix. They're on generally quiet back roads and they attract a wider range of people. So in London there's been an explosion in the number of people cycling, but that's been very concentrated on a particular demographic, generally white middle-class males, and quiet ways have been proven to attract a much wider range of people, so they're a really important part of the mix.
There we go, thoughts there from Sustrans, very similar to some of the points we heard before the break. Tiffany, just in terms of the gender breakdown of who is cycling, I know this is something that you've looked into. It's not often as inclusive as it perhaps should be. Why is that?
So despite increased investments in cycling over the past decade and a half, and despite an overall growth in cycling, the gender gap has persisted, whereby men in London make 75% of cycle journeys. So this percentage, this gender gap hasn't changed. A lot of that has to do with the fact that, one, when we talk about cycling infrastructure, most of that is the material infrastructure of cycle lanes, which is important, but that leaves out social infrastructure. Education, encouragement, these kinds of schemes are needed, especially at underrepresented or among underrepresented populations, to get people to feel like they can cycle, that cycling is for people like me. The second issue is that when we look at policy documents and policy representations of cyclists, like in Boris Johnson's vision, the mayor's vision for cycling, he refers to the mammals and the hipsters, which are facetious stereotypes of cyclists, but when you see them reinforced in policy documents, it kind of amplifies the idea that policymakers and planners are only thinking about cyclists as mammals or hipsters, middle-class, middle-aged white men, and these stereotypes cannot be reinforced at the policy level because it has very exclusionary impacts on the ground.
On a safety level, do you think having a quieter route will encourage more people, just perhaps in terms of confidence? They might think, actually, I feel like I am more capable of using my bike because I'm less likely to come up against a large lorry or a jam of traffic.
Definitely. In studies of cities worldwide, both men and women prefer protected, separated cycle lanes and quiet routes with lower traffic. The problem is we can't just look at the quantity of quiet ways or protected cycle lanes. We have to look at the quality of these networks. How seamlessly do they join up with other safe cycle routes? and what is the experience of being on them in terms of street lighting, potholes, the presence of cycle racks and other people so you feel safe and that you can stop and start relatively easily.
Okay, let's bring in the planner then. How joined up are we? Are we joining all of our networks up nicely?
I think that the quiet ways, I think, are an excellent soft measure in a way. They are an excellent thing in making cycling more commonplace. You see a lot more sort of diversity on quiet ways. I know we did a piece of research on Royal College Street, which was sort of before all the quiet ways and superhighways, but it had a great deal sort of more gender balance. There was lots more people in normal clothes. There were people not wearing helmets, and I think that sort of starts to make cycling a lot more normal. And I think that's a big part of the quiet ways, which I think is very useful. In terms of how the quiet ways are working, I think there's more that can be done, especially sort of if you take the quiet ways going through to Beauvoir and Hackney. They've actually tried to make quiet ways by sort of using filtered permeability and sort of almost setting up these sort of traffic cells. So you push through traffic through to the sort of outside streets, and then to penetrate through the internal streets, you can access your residential property, but you can't go through unless you're a bicycle or walking. And I think that's the next step, I think, in sort of joining up these quiet ways through a lot more sort of meaningful measures to actually make them quiet, rather than just picking fairly quiet streets.
Donica, just in terms of promoting cycling as a form of transport, should we be doing that at a stage when we can't guarantee safety? I think we've had at least 10 deaths this year so far.
Yeah, thankfully, since the previous mayor introduced safer mirrors, the number of deaths has gone down by a third. But the facts state that around 10 people a year are killed tragically by cycling, 10 too many. 100 people are killed nearly by walking. You saw that 10 times more people are killed, and we don't say people shouldn't walk. So the facts on safety are really crucial. So if you cycle, you are likely to have 3 years extra healthy life added to you. The chances of you being involved in a crash are minuscule compared to that. There's amazing stats from the NHS studies showing that for an extraordinary range of diseases, you've got 40% less chance of getting cancers, heart diseases, diabetes, diabetes from cycling. So if we want to save lives, we will save tens of thousands of lives by extra people cycling, and maybe a tiny number of people tragically killed.
So you're kind of suggesting that actually it's a very safe form of transport in that respect. Therefore, why do we really need to make such measures and such steps forward in terms of changing things, if it's actually okay?
Good question. Probably because the perceived danger from most people is they do not want to share a road with a HGV truck inches from them or a bus from them. 60% of Londoners want to cycle, but they're terrified. So we actually see our campaign for infrastructure that Chris is building, our campaign is for the non-cyclists, to enable the non-cyclists to have the courage to cycle, and that's why infrastructure is crucial. In Holland, we're talking about inclusivity, just finish my point. Inclusivity, crucial to ethnic minorities and women to be cycling more. Our kids are invisible on our streets. In Holland, 80% of kids cycle to school because it's safe. Britain, 5%. What does that mean? Obesity crisis in our schools, and that means tragic ill health for the rest of their lives.
So there's obviously there's certainly the education aspect, isn't there? There's awareness. Sorry, Christopher, you were going to say.
I was just going to pick up on that word. The word perception is huge. Like space in cities is scarce and only getting more scarce. So we really need to prioritise ways of getting about in cities which are really space efficient, and we need more people to cycle in London. We just need it for the health benefits, but also sort of for prosperity of them. Like if you look at the sort of research done on high streets after public realm and cycling improvements, the sort of sales have gone up against control streets. So it's good for business cycling. If you look at spend by mode per week, it's walking and cycling, they spend more than if people are driving. So it's good for everyone if we can get more people cycling. So we need to tackle that perception head on, and that making it seem safer is very important.
Yeah, we've mentioned Holland quite a lot. Tiffany, where else is getting it right? Which other city is brilliant at cycling?
I just want to add one more thing about perceptions of safety, which are crucial to get more women cycling, and perceptions of safety entail not only safety from road traffic danger, but also personal safety from street harassment and sexual harassment, which is a daily reality for women and girls. In terms of cities that are doing it right, I think the most obvious answers are Copenhagen and Amsterdam. And the most important thing to remember about both cities is that they had a completely different post-war trajectory where instead of building for cars, it wasn't all about highways and all that, but rather people-centered streets that made walking and cycling easy, doable, and the preferable mode of transport. So that took decades, and it didn't happen overnight, and it won't happen overnight in London, but it starts with a very strong political imperative, political will to design cities for people to walk and cycle safely.
We're out of time, I'm afraid, but very quickly.
No, I was going to say that Copenhagen's always cited, but it's not just full of people they're not just fitness addicts. It's people just getting about as the easiest way possible, and that's the same here. So I think,
yeah, a city which lends itself. Thank you so much for joining us. We are out of time. That has been our debate looking at cycle safety. Thanks to our panel, Donica McCarthy, Tiffany F. Lamb, and Christopher Martin. Luke Blackall here with the news next. From me, have a lovely evening. Take care. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much.
It's comedy film season here on London Live. Spoof king Leslie Nielsen kicks things off tonight in Wrongfully Accused at 8, before a student rocks Julianne Moore's world as she stars as the English teacher at 10.